My name is Allison Matthews, and I'm 28 years old. If you had met me just a year ago, you would have seen a woman who believed she had her life together. I had a stable job as a financial analyst in Chicago, a small but cozy apartment, and a savings account. I was proud of one that I built from countless late nights and early mornings, from skipped vacations and second jobs, from saying no when I wanted to say yes, because I knew my future depended on it. What I didn't know was that the future I was working so hard to protect would be shattered, not by a layoff, not by an unexpected medical bill, but by the people I trusted most, my own family. I grew up in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, in a small two-story house with chipped paint on the porch and a yard my mother tried her best to keep alive. My dad, James Matthews, was the kind of man who could light up a room with a story, who made you believe that the next business venture would be the one to change everything, who laughed loudest at family barbecues while flipping burgers with a beer in hand. But what most people didn't see was that those business ventures never panned out, that the laughter would fade late at night when bills piled up and the mortgage hovered over us like a dark cloud, that he would promise to get it right next time, while my mom, Karen, quietly picked up extra shifts as a nurse to keep food on the table. Mom was the strong one, the quiet force that held us together. She would wake up at dawn to pack my lunch before heading out for a 12-hour shift. And when she came home, she still managed to check my homework, fold the laundry, and smile as she kissed my forehead goodnight. I was 12 when I learned what an overdraft fee was, sitting at the top of the stairs with a teddy bear pressed to my chest, listening to my parents fight about money they didn't have, about checks that bounced, about the electricity bill that might not get paid that month. That night, I made a promise to myself I would never depend on anyone financially. Ever. By 14, I was babysitting for neighbors after school, earning just enough to tuck away into a small envelope I hid in my dresser. At 16, I started working weekend shifts at the local diner, wiping down tables, while watching my classmates walk by in groups, laughing as they made plans I could never join because I was working. Every dollar mattered. I watched as my mom carefully wrote down every expense in a small notebook, teaching me how to budget, how to save, how to be ready for emergencies, because life happens, Allison, and you have to be prepared. Money doesn't buy happiness, she would say, but it gives you choices. It gives you freedom. When I turned 18, I opened my first savings account with the money I had earned from babysitting and working late nights. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it felt like safety. I worked hard in school, driven by the promise I made to myself that night on the stairs. I earned a scholarship to Northwestern, and while my friends partied on weekends, I was working at the library or taking shifts at a nearby cafe, sneaking in study sessions between customers. When I graduated, I didn't have student debt weighing me down like so many of my peers. Instead, I walked across that stage with a job offer waiting for me, ready to start my life with a clean slate and a promise to myself that I would never end up like my parents, arguing over bills, drowning in debt, losing sleep over rent. My first paycheck felt like freedom. I used part of it to buy my mom a gold bracelet. It wasn't expensive by most standards, but for me, it was a symbol of everything she had taught me, everything I had worked for, and the sacrifices she made to give me a chance at a different life. Life was moving in the direction I wanted it to. I had a good job, a growing savings account, and a small apartment I could afford on my own. I was careful with my money, living below my means, putting away a little more each month toward my goal of buying my first home. And I kept my distance from my family, not because I didn't love them, but because I needed to protect the life I was building from the chaos that always seemed to follow them. After Mom passed away from cancer, the fragile stability in our family fell apart. Dad was lost without her. He tried to keep himself together, but it was clear he was drowning, unable to manage the bills, the house, or even himself. That was when Linda came into the picture. Linda was everything my mother wasn't. She was loud, flashy, and unapologetically materialistic. She wore designer clothes and carried handbags that I knew cost more than my monthly rent. She had a teenage son, Max, who barely spoke, always hiding behind a screen, tapping away at his phone with quick, practiced fingers. Dad was smitten. Linda made him feel alive again, or so he said. They married after just 8 months, and I stood there in a navy blue dress, trying to smile, trying to pretend that I wasn't watching my dad slip away from me, trying to believe that maybe this was what he needed to heal. I tried to keep my distance. I limited my visits to holidays, sending polite texts when I couldn't make it to family dinners, focusing on my work and my savings on building the life I had promised myself I would have. But then came the invitation to the family reunion. It was at my Uncle Robert's lake house in Michigan, a beautiful property that always seemed like another world to me growing up. A place where laughter echoed across the water, where cousins I hadn't seen in years would gather, where for a moment we could pretend we were a happy family. Part of me didn't want to go. I was busy with work, and the thought of spending a weekend surrounded by family pretending everything was fine was exhausting. But another part of me felt guilty. Mom would have wanted me to go to show up to be there for my family, even if it was hard. It's just one weekend, I told myself as I packed my bag. I can handle it. When I arrived, I noticed the cars first. Expensive SUVs lined the driveway, and in the middle of them was a brand new pickup truck that I had never seen before, shining under the sun like a beacon. Dad's truck. Linda greeted me at the door, her perfume hitting me before her words did. She was wearing a dress I recognized from a designer's new collection, and on her wrist was a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light as she waved. Allison. So glad you could make it, she said, kissing the air near my cheeks. Dad hugged me tightly, and for a moment I let myself believe everything was okay. But as I pulled away, I noticed the watch on his wrist. An Omega, the kind of watch that didn't make sense for a man living on a pension. Inside the house was buzzing with noise, cousins laughing, kids running around, uncles and aunts catching up on life. But beneath the laughter was something else, something I couldn't quite place. At dinner, the conversations turned to plans for vacations, new purchases, and investments. Linda mentioned a trip to Aspen they were planning for winter. My half-sister Kay talked about a new condo she was buying. Tyler, my half-brother, flashed a Rolex on his wrist, a graduation gift, he said proudly. All of it didn't add up. I knew what Linda did for work, and it wasn't enough for a lifestyle like this. I knew what my dad's pension was, and it didn't cover Rolex watches and trips to Aspen, and the way they talked about money so casually, so carelessly, made my stomach twist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifting up from the porch. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the way Linda looked at me, the way Dad avoided conversations about money, the way Max's eyes flickered up from his phone whenever I entered the room. I wanted to leave, but I told myself I was overthinking it. The next morning, as I packed to leave, Aunt Patricia pulled me aside. "Your dad seems to be doing well," she said, her voice low. "Yeah," I replied cautiously. "He paid Robert back all the money he owed him. All at once." I frowned. Money for what he said it was for medical bills, but... She trailed off, looking away. But what I pressed. She shook her head. "It's nothing, just... be careful, Allison." The drive back to Chicago felt longer than usual. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of the weekend, every comment, every glance, every uncomfortable silence. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid, that it was none of my business how they spent their money. But deep down I knew. When I got home, I didn't even take my bags inside. I sat in my car, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app, and that's when I saw it. My heart stopped. The balance that should have been $47,236 was now $236. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake, a glitch, something that could be fixed with a phone call. But as I scrolled through the transactions, the truth hit me like a wave crashing over my body. 5 transactions, all under $10,000, all transferred to an account I didn't recognize, all while I was at the family reunion. I sat there in the silence of my car, the weight of the betrayal sinking in, pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. My family, my own family. The people who smiled at me across the dinner table, who hugged me, who told me they loved me. They had taken everything, and in that moment I realized something my mother tried to teach me, something I didn't want to believe. Sometimes family isn't your safe place. Sometimes family is the storm you have to survive. What would you do if your own family smiled at you across the dinner table while draining your entire life savings? Stay tuned for part 2 to see what happened when I confronted them and discovered the truth I wasn't ready to face. I remember staring at the screen in my car, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes as if they were mocking me. $47,000 money I had saved from sleepless nights, skipped vacations, and quiet Friday evenings spent working overtime gone. Just like that. All that was left was $236, the number blinking on my phone like a cruel joke. My family had smiled at me past the potatoes around the dinner table and asked me about work, about when I would start dating again, about when I would finally live a little. And the entire time they were draining me dry, I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I felt this cold, hard steel settle in my chest, a resolve I hadn't felt since I was a kid watching my parents fight about overdraft fees and past due bills. I took a deep breath and called the bank. The wait music was soft, jazz, cheerful, and out of place, as I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, my thumb tapping against it in time with the beat of my heart. When the representative answered, her voice was polite, almost too polite, as she explained what I already suspected. The transfers were made using your authenticated device, Miss Matthews, over the course of 2 days. I swallowed. What times? She paused, clicking through her system. 2 transactions yesterday between 2:15 and 4:30 p.m., and 3 today between 10:00 a.m. and noon. I did the math in my head. Those were the exact times Max had borrowed my phone to look up something, and when my phone was left on the kitchen counter while I packed to leave. My heart pounded as the pieces clicked together. Max. Max, who never looked me in the eye, who was always glued to his phone, who Linda praised for being so smart with computers. The representative continued, her voice robotic. We will open an investigation, but because the transactions were completed on your device with your login, there's no guarantee of recovery. My vision blurred for a moment, but I blinked away the tears, refusing to let them fall. Thank you, I said, and hung up. I sat in the silence of my car, the world outside moving around me, as if nothing had changed, as if everything was normal. It wasn't. Without even thinking, I started my car and drove. It was an hour-long drive to my father's house, but it felt like it took only minutes. My hands were tight on the wheel, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. My mind raced with every memory of that weekend, every laugh, every smile, every moment Linda reached out to touch my arm while telling me I should enjoy life more. Enjoy life, with my money. I didn't knock. I pushed open the door, the hinges creaking as I stepped inside. Linda was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, the smell of garlic and butter filling the air. Allison, she said, smiling, her eyes bright. What a surprise. Where is he? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. She blinked the smile, faltering for a split second before returning. He's in the living room. I didn't wait for her to finish. Dad was sitting in his recliner, the television playing some game show, the host's laughter ringing through the room. Dad, I said. He looked up, his face lighting up for a moment before he saw mine. Allison, he said. What's wrong? Turn it off, I said, nodding toward the TV. He hesitated, then clicked the remote, the room falling into silence. I took a deep breath, feeling the rage and betrayal boiling under the surface. Where's my money? He blinked. What? My money, Dad. The $47,000 that disappeared from my account while I was at the family reunion. His face changed, a flicker of something, guilt, shame, something before it hardened. We needed it. The words hit me like a slap. You needed it. I repeated, my voice shaking. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Allison, you have so much. You have a good job, you're doing well, and that doesn't make it yours to take. I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet room. Linda appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. Allison, let's calm down, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Family helps family. I turned to her, my eyes narrowing. Don't you dare! She raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching into a smirk. You're young, you'll make it back, she said, shrugging. The rage inside me exploded. You stole from me! I screamed, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. All of you. You looked me in the eyes and you stole from me. Dad stood up, his hands out in front of him. Allison, please, did you do it, Dad? Or was it her idea? I asked, pointing at Linda. Silence. Linda crossed her arms, tilting her head. Max did it, she said, as if it was nothing. My breath caught. What Max accessed your phone did what needed to be done. She continued, examining her nails. It was the only way. The only way for what? I asked, my voice shaking. Linda looked at Dad and he looked away. Dad, I pressed. He didn't look at me as he said it. I have debts, Allison. I stared at him, the world crashing around me. Debts? What kind of debts? He swallowed his shoulders, slumping. Gambling. I took a step back, the room spinning. Gambling, of course. Linda's voice cut through the silence. Your father has been trying to fix things, but it's hard when collectors come knocking, threatening us. Threatening Max. Don't you dare bring him into this, I snapped. She raised an eyebrow. He's part of this family too, Allison. Family helps family. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Family doesn't steal from each other. Dad finally looked at me, his eyes red. I'm sorry, Allison, he whispered. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. That night, I sat on my apartment floor, staring at the ceiling, the words replaying in my head. We needed it. Family helps family. You'll make it back. I thought about Mom, about how hard she worked to give me a chance at a better life, about the promises I made to her, to protect myself, to never let anyone drain me dry. And here I was, letting it happen. My phone buzzed, breaking me out of my thoughts. It was Rachel. You home? Her text read. I typed back, yeah. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Rachel was standing there with 2 pints of ice cream and a look that said she knew everything without me having to say a word. We sat on the couch, the ice cream between us, the silence heavy. Tell me everything, she said softly. I did. I told her about the reunion, about the cars, the watches, the trip to Aspen, about Linda's smile, about Max and my phone, about the bank call, about the confrontation, about the gambling. When I finished, Rachel was quiet, her eyes on the floor. Then she looked up. You have to fight this, Allie, she said. I can't, I whispered. They're my family. She shook her head. Family doesn't do this. If you let them get away with it, they'll do it again. You'll lose more than money. You'll lose yourself. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, what if I lose them forever? Rachel reached over, taking my hand. Then they were never yours to lose. The next morning, I called Diana Foster, a lawyer, a co-worker had recommended for financial disputes. Her voice was calm, steady, as I explained everything. When I finished, there was a pause. Allison, I'm so sorry this happened to you, she said. I swallowed, fighting tears. What do I do, you fight, she said. We'll file a civil suit. We'll get your money back. Filing the paperwork felt like betrayal. It felt like drawing a line in the sand, a line I could never uncross. But it also felt like taking my power back. Word spread fast. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years started calling, sending messages, taking sides. Some said they were proud of me for standing up for myself. Others called me ungrateful, selfish, a terrible daughter. Tyler sent me a message, I can't believe you're doing this. Kay sent me a message too. Please don't do this. We can fix this as a family. But it was too late. They made their choice. Now I was making mine. A week after filing, I got a message from an unknown number. Drop the case or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, fear coiling in my stomach. Then I took a deep breath, locked my phone, and whispered to myself, no. They could threaten me. They could call me names. They could try to make me feel guilty. But they would never take my power again. What would you do if your family smiled at you while draining your life savings, then threatened you for fighting back? In part 3, I'll tell you what happened when I stood my ground, took them to court, and learned the truth that changed everything. They say when you decide to stand up for yourself, you're prepared to lose people. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the people you lose are the ones you thought you could never live without. After I filed the lawsuit, everything changed. Family members who once sent me Christmas cards stopped calling. Some cousins blocked me on Facebook while others sent me long messages about family loyalty and airing dirty laundry. And the threats came. Voicemails from blocked numbers telling me to drop the case or you'll regret it. Anonymous texts saying family doesn't take family to court. I wish I could tell you I wasn't scared. I was. Every noise outside my apartment made me jump. Every unknown number made my stomach drop. There were moments I sat in the shower, letting the water run until it turned cold, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But then I would think of my mother, of her tired hands folding my clothes after a long shift, of the way she taught me to write down every expense in a small notebook, so we would always know what we had. She didn't work that hard for me to let it all go without a fight. The morning of the court hearing was cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. Diana met me outside the courthouse, her hair tied back, her eyes sharp, her voice calm. Ready, she asked. I took a breath and nodded. Ready. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and stale coffee, the air humming with the low whispers of people waiting for their cases to be called. When my father walked in, it felt like the air shifted. He looked older than I remembered, tired, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit him right. Linda was next to him, her hair pulled back, makeup perfect, dressed in a navy suit that screamed respectable wife. But the way she scanned the room, her jaw tight, told me she knew exactly what was at stake. Max followed behind, eyes down, hands shoved into his pockets, the same way he used to stand in the kitchen when Linda scolded him for leaving dishes in the sink. Tyler and Kay were there too, sitting behind Dad and Linda, the tension between them thick enough to touch. I took my seat next to Diana, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As the proceedings began, it felt surreal. I was suing my father. I was suing the people who once sat across the dinner table from me, who told me they loved me, who hugged me when I graduated college. But when Diana stood and began laying out the evidence, it all became clear. Transaction records, times and dates, the moments Max had my phone, Linda's history of moving in with men and draining them financially, screenshots of messages between Linda and Max planning how to access my accounts, how to keep the transactions under $10,000 to avoid alerts. It was all there. Then Diana called Kay to the stand. Kay walked slowly, her hands trembling as she took the oath. I could see the tears in her eyes as she began to speak. Linda and Max planned it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They talked about how they could get into Allison's phone, how it was for the family, how they would pay it back once things got better. She paused, wiping her eyes. I didn't say anything because I was scared. Linda promised to help me with school tuition if I kept quiet. My father's head dropped into his hands. Linda's jaw clenched. Diana was calm, patient, letting Kay speak, letting the truth finally come out. Then it was Max's turn. He tried to avoid it at first, shrugging, mumbling, looking at Linda for reassurance. But when Diana presented the screenshots, the logs from his computer, the emails created in my name, he broke. I did it, he said, his voice cracking. I hacked her phone. I made the transfers. Linda told me it was the only way to help with the debts. The courtroom was silent. You could feel the weight of the betrayal hanging in the air. Then came the final blow. Diana had found Linda's ex-husband, Edward Pearson, and brought him in as a witness. He was a quiet man, his eyes tired, his hands shaking slightly as he testified. She did it to me too, he said. She told me she loved me, that she would help me get back on my feet, and then she drained my accounts. When I found out she disappeared with Max, changed their names, and moved across the country, Linda's face turned red, her composure cracking as she whispered harshly to her lawyer. But the damage was done. Finally, the judge turned to my father. Mr. Matthews, do you have anything to say before I rule on this case? My father stood, his shoulders slumped, his eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Allison, I'm so sorry. I let Linda convince me this was the only way. I let my gambling get out of control. I betrayed you. I betrayed your mother's memory. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know the truth. My heart ached, but I said nothing. The judge's ruling was clear. Linda was ordered to pay restitution and was referred for criminal charges of fraud and identity theft. Max was to enter a diversion program for his role, but would testify against Linda in the criminal case. My father was ordered to enter a gambling rehabilitation program and pay what he could toward restitution. The judge's words were final. This court finds in favor of Allison Matthews. While no judgment can restore what was taken emotionally, it is my hope that this ruling brings a measure of justice. When the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over. The damage was done. But it was a start. After the ruling, the family fractured completely. Some relatives called to apologize, to say they didn't know, to say they were proud of me. Others called me a traitor, a bad daughter, someone who destroyed the family. In the weeks that followed, I struggled to find my footing. I missed my mother more than ever. I missed the idea of family, of having a place where I belonged. But I knew that place didn't exist, not anymore. I started therapy with Dr. Levine, a woman who specialized in family betrayal trauma. She taught me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. She told me that forgiveness was not an obligation, that it was a choice, and that it was okay if I wasn't ready. Slowly, I began to heal. I started leading workshops at a local community center, teaching financial literacy, helping women understand how to protect themselves from financial abuse, even when the abuser was family. I told my story not for sympathy, but so others would know they weren't alone. One day I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from my father. Dear Allison, I'm writing from the treatment center. The doctors here say part of healing is making amends. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying to become the man your mother loved again, the father you deserved. I read it, folded it carefully, and placed it in a box. I wasn't ready to respond. But I was glad he was trying. A few months later, Kay reached out. We met at a coffee shop, the air thick with unspoken words. I'm sorry, she said. I should have told you sooner. You were scared, I replied. I get it. We talked slowly, rebuilding a relationship, but on my terms with clear boundaries. When the check from the restitution came, I used part of it to set up a trust for Kay's college tuition, managed by a third-party trustee, so Linda or Dad could never touch it. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about breaking the cycle. 6 months after the trial, I agreed to meet my father for coffee. He looked older, but clearer, more present. We talked about Mom, about life, about the damage done. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't give it, but I listened, and that was enough for now. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking at the city lights, feeling the cool air on my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. And I want you to know this: protecting yourself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Standing up for yourself isn't betrayal. It's love. Love for yourself. Love for the life you're building. Love for the person you're becoming. If you've ever had to walk away from people you love to protect yourself, I want you to know you're not alone. And I am proud of you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your family to protect yourself? I would love to hear your story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that protecting yourself is never wrong. Stay strong, stay safe, stay true to yourself.